Okay, guys, welcome to God's Corner, and I want to talk about which is which is right. Thou shalt not kill versus thou shalt not murder. Okay, the only religion out there that's in Christianity that believes that thou shalt not murder is the Protestants, and they do this out of pride. I want to explain the difference because I saw a clip of Charlie Kirk. God bless him. I love him. Great person, but he's gone now, and I'm not doing this as a blasphemy thing, okay? But he mentioned that it's okay to kill, but it's not okay to murder, and actually he's wrong. His stance on it was because of the first five books of the Bible, the Torah. They talk about taking a human life for a human life. That's the law of Moses, which was a temporary law with God, a temporary covenant with God, which is the Old Testament, was a temporary covenant with God. Our new covenant with God was renewed through Jesus Christ, who taught the complete opposite. If you remember, Jesus Christ drew a drawing with the adulteress in the sand and said, and all the people that gathered said, is it not written that, this person committed adultery, that she is to be stoned to death? And he said, let the first man who is sinless cast the first stone. Well, everybody, we all know it has sin. So eventually all the people dropped the stones. And then what did Jesus do? Forgave her of her sins and said, go and sin no more. Okay, so what we need to understand is this. In the Old Testament was a temporary covenant with God with a temporary law through Moses, okay, that justified taking a life for life. The new covenant with God, which is in the New Testament, which is what you should be reading, not the Old Testament, okay, is the complete opposite of that because of Jesus Christ. What did Jesus Christ teach? To love everyone, including your enemies. Are we loving someone if we're killing them? No, right? All right. And also, it tells us that we are to respect human life, right? So, no to abortion, no to suicide, no to wars. Any kind of taking of life is wrong because contextually, we're not to take a human life. Remember, it's in the Bible too. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Okay? So the only one justified to take a human life is God Himself and no one else. And this is all through Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ also taught us to turn the other cheek. And He also said too that if someone comes in to steal your stuff, let them. Matter of fact, give them your cloak. It's in the Bible. Seriously, people need to read the New Testament. This is a big misunderstanding between thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not murder as being the Ten Commandments. The problem with the Protestant version of it, which is thou shalt not murder, is that they're going to the Old Testament to justify it. But when you look at our new covenant with God, Jesus Christ condemned it and said, I'm the only one that's allowed to take human life, no one else. Okay? So this is just, a quick little thing about this. Like, there's a lot more that I could say about it, right? But like I said, I only get 15 minutes and I don't want to make my videos too long. I want to make them long enough that it makes sense. So when we look into the Bible, who's right? Thou shalt not kill versus thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not kill is right. Because we're not allowed to take a human life at all under any kind of circumstance, even in self-defense. And Jesus taught us these things, okay? So if you disagree with that, I would highly recommend that you go back and read the Bible again, reading the New Testament, not the Old Testament. Remember, the Old Testament was a temporary covenant with God that included the law of Moses. That changed dramatically when Jesus Christ came on the scene and proved that He was the Messiah. And then our covenant with God was renewed and these things were changed. So in the Ten Commandments, Jesus made it clear, thou shalt not kill, not thou shalt not murder. He also said too, to love your enemies. And you're not loving your enemies if you're killing them. And if you go to the book of Psalms, Psalm 11:5, it says, like, the Lord will judge the good and the bad and hates those who love violence. Note the last part, hates those who love violence. There's no more of a violent act than taking a human life under any condition. Another thing too, what you're doing when you kill somebody who's trying to kill you, or when you kill someone through the death penalty or in war or anything like that, is that you're taking away their ability to get right with God. Okay? So you're taking away their ability to admit that they're a sinner and that they apologize to God for their sins. And this is why only the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. So only God can take life. No one else can take life. We're not justified in taking human life. So even brilliant people like Charlie Kirk can get it wrong. And this is the problem with Protestantism, right? They were the ones that changed the Ten Commandments, not the Catholic Church, As a matter of fact, when you look at the Orthodox Church, they even agree thou shalt not kill, okay? The only ones that don't agree with that is the Protestants, and they go with thou shalt not murder because they're stuck with the 5 books of Torah, which is in the Old Testament, okay? So remember, that was a temporary covenant with God, okay, through the law of Moses that allowed you to take a human life when another life was taken. But under the new covenant with God through Jesus Christ, that was abolished. And it was proven when Jesus Christ was tested by it with the woman that committed adultery, and everybody wanted to stone her to death because that was the law. But that was the law of Moses. Jesus came to change all of that and give us a new covenant with God with new rules. So even the 10 Commandments have changed from what was in the book of Exodus, in Exodus 20, to what it is now because of Jesus Christ and our new covenant with God. And I would highly recommend that you use discernment here and critical analytical thinking and really think about this for a second, what I'm saying, okay? Because what I'm saying is that thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder was justified because you were able to kill under the law of Moses, which was the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Torah, of which are the first 5 books of the Bible, but then that was a temporary covenant with God. It changed when we came into the New Testament, which was our permanent covenant with God, and Jesus Christ changed that. Because he said, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. The Lord hates those who love violence, okay? And he gives us some examples. He actually did this physically himself when he was here. He drew a symbol in the sand, drew something in the sand with the adulteress, and said, let the first man who is sinless cast the first stone. What happened? Everybody dropped their stones because they're all sinners. What did Jesus do? He said, go and sin no more. He didn't stone her. He didn't kill her. Okay, and when you look at Jesus Christ and his teachings, he talks about turn the other cheek. If you get hit in one face, turn the other way, right? He talks about, these kinds of things about violence, and he's against violence. He even tells you to love your enemies. And are you loving them if you're justifying killing somebody? No. Even in self-defense? No. Okay? Jesus never did anything violent. And the worst thing that he ever did was overturn the tables, knock the coins away, and free the birds when they turned his father's temple, the church, into a marketplace. That's the only thing he did, but he never touched a human being. Never touched a human being. If you read the Bible, the New Testament, you actually see Jesus Christ was not a violent person, ever, and never condoned violence at all. So you have to understand your new covenant with God is through Jesus Christ, not through the Old Testament, but through the New Testament. And this is why it's extremely important to read the New Testament and go by what it says versus what the Old Testament says. Okay? All right? So no, you're not justified. You're not allowed to kill anybody. You're not allowed to have the death penalty. You're not allowed to kill someone in self-defense or in any other way, shape, or form, because you're going against the teachings of Jesus Christ, which is our new covenant with God. So God bless you. Thank you for watching, and I hope that this makes sense to you. Thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you in the next video. And I just remembered I forgot to wear my rosary for this. I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to get this out right away because I felt it was extremely important. And even though Charlie Kirk is gone now, we still have to use constructive criticism when we see, these videos pop up. The problem with Protestantism is that it's full of pride, and they don't humble themselves to actually really stop and use critical analytical thinking and discernment. They just want to justify the sin, and so it's wrong to kill someone, okay? And this is why I'm against the King James Version of the Bible, because it's leading people down the wrong path, because it says thou shalt not murder. No, Jesus Christ changed that to thou shalt not kill, because Jesus Christ condemned killing of any kind of a human being, because it takes away the person's right to get right with God for their sins, okay? And Jesus was the only one that's allowed to take a life, and he even proved that he never took a human life when he was down here physically with the adulteress as an example, which I already explained, okay? So hopefully everything makes sense here. If you're confused, post your comments down below. I suggest that you pray with discernment and that you actually really think about this and contemplate, right? Okay, the differences between thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not murder, the differences between the old covenant with God, which was temporary, which is in the Old Testament, which is in the book of Torah, which is the law of Moses, where they justify it, but then it got changed through the new covenant through Jesus Christ, and that is where we should be focused on. Jesus condemned those of any type of killing whatsoever, any kind of violence. And Jesus hates those that love violence. And the most violent act you can do is to take a human life. So hopefully this video made sense. I'm running out of time here. And God bless you. Remember, our covenant with God is in the New Testament. Let me make that clear. Our covenant with God, our permanent covenant with God, is in the New Testament. And when Jesus Christ was renewing the 10 Commandments, the only one that, was an exception to, on top of thou shalt not murder and kill kind of thing, it was like, no, you're not allowed to kill, was also to obey the Sabbath day. That's another one that's under question too. Do we need to still do the Sabbath day? And in the New Testament, Jesus goes, no, we're going off and we're doing our thing, and, we're preaching the word of God and that sort of thing. Again, we have to understand the differences between the Old Testament and the New Testament. The New Testament is our permanent covenant with God, and that's where we should be focused on, not the Old Testament. So if you're reading the Bible, the best thing to do is to read the New Testament and understand the teachings of Jesus Christ. He never condoned violence. Okay, he never condoned, stoning people to death. He never condoned, taking another person's life, ever. Okay, all right. Matter of fact, he said, turn the other cheek. If someone comes to rob you, give them your cloak, So he's like completely the opposite of that. He's all about love. He says, love your enemies even, okay? You're not loving somebody if you're killing them, all right? It's not justified. Not according to the New Testament, which is our new covenant and permanent covenant with God. So please focus on the New Testament, read the New Testament, understand the New Testament, because that's your covenant with God now, okay? Thanks a lot for your time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm almost out of time here. God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.